is Adam. So for those of you guys who were here last week, well, not here, we were across campus. I'm glad you're here. So I've been on staff for a while with Badger Crew, and I'm really glad you guys are here. So you found Ag Hall. Anybody, this is your first time in the building? Oh, you found it. It's kind of weird, you know? It's like, there's actually tons of people up there, but you folks have no idea that they're right. So, but I'm really glad you're here. One of the cool things about being on staff with Crew, and even being involved with Crew, is you really get to go all sorts of places around the planet and do all sorts of fun things. And one of the funnest things for my wife and I, and for our family, is that every summer you get, when you're on staff, you get like a summer assignment. You have to travel somewhere around the planet. And you're there for like 6 to 8 weeks. And so, you know, we've been to places in East Asia. We spent 6 to 8 weeks in East Asia, in the Middle East. We spent 8 weeks in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. When a crew does these like leadership and spiritual development projects, we call them summer projects, we did that in North Carolina. And then we spent 8 weeks in Ocean City. And then, speaking of reality TV, then this next year, actually for the next 2 years, my wife and my good friend Charlie Keller are going to be pioneering a new summer project, these summer projects on the Jersey Shore, Seaside Heights, New Jersey. Yeah. So the home of Snooki, right? So I'm driven by Snooki's house, and right? So I know. But it's a fantastic thing. There's really fun stuff about being involved with Crew, being on staff. Because I get to travel the planet, do cool stuff, and talk to people all over the world about life, God, and that sort of thing. Every 2 years, we get to do, all the staff from all over the country get together in Colorado. We have like a training sort of conference. And I grew up in Iowa, right? So the nice, flat, probably the best state, I think, to drive through. So, right, arguably the best state to drive through on your way to Colorado. But anyways, we get to spend some time out there. I'm from Iowa, so I grew up like flat, right? You know, like I didn't know mountains. But then I married my wife, and she has all sorts of like family history, heritage in the mountains. Her great-grandfather moved to the States from Switzerland, and back like turn of the century, late 1800s, something like that. And he wanted to find a place that reminded him of home. And so he bought this property in what's now the Rocky Mountain National Park. And so their family owned this property right at the base of the trailhead for Longs Peak, the tallest mountain in the Rocky Mountain National Park. And he ran the Longs Peak Inn for a long time. And so they have this cabin that's still there. And Alicia, my wife, she was like the president of the sorority, right? You know, like, so she's like, you know, she like does high heels, you know, all this sort of stuff. But she can go from like high heels to hiking boots in like 2 minutes. And she's like this closet mountain woman. So she grew up doing all these hikes, doing all sorts of stuff. She could like, she hiked across the continental divide for like 7 days with her dad and her uncle, you know, like killing fish with spears, pointing things, and you know, eating them like olive. And she's fantastic. So when we got married, she introduced me to the mountains. So this is keep going. There you go. So this is our first or second year that we were married out in Colorado. And we're backpacking. So there's something manly, I think, about like strapping all of your food to your body and like a knife and a fly fishing pole and being like, I'm not coming back for 3 days. You know? And so I just totally fell in love with the mountains. And REI is like my favorite store. But I'm kind of a poser, really. So I want to have cool gear because I don't want all the other mountain men to laugh at me. I don't think you know that I really don't. I'm from Iowa, you know. I never saw anything taller than my house. So, but I love this. It's one of my favorite things to do is getting to go out to Colorado. And my wife and I, we've done a ton of hikes. And so a few years ago we were out there and we got this hiking guide from the national park. And we're trying to find a hike that neither of us had done. We came to this one that was called the Spectacle Lakes. And it's this alpine lake that's up at about like 12,500 feet. And we're reading the guide for it. And it's like, you know, it starts off kind of, you know, fairly easy, but a decent incline. but then the last quarter mile, the height gains about 1,000 feet. And the Spectacle Lakes are on the top of that rock face, way up there. And it says, the final stretch to the Spectacle Lakes will make many trail-accustomed hikers, what is it, like, discouraged or distraught, or something like, you will pass out with fear, or whatever. And we're like, I wonder what that means. Let's do it. So we go and we take some friends with us to climb to do this lake. We've never been there. And some of our friends, it was like their first hike of the season. They weren't terribly accustomed. My one friend, it was like his first hike of the year, and he's like, like 6'4", 260 pounds, whatever. And nobody knows what we're getting into. And then we come to this clearing and we see that face, and then we're trying to figure out how the heck to get up to it, because the trail disappears, and you just have to kind of find your way. And as we're going up, I'm having tons of fun, because I'm like a rock monkey. I'm like jumping over boulders, climbing up, having all sorts of fun, and my wife and her best friend are getting kind of nervous. They're like, are you sure we're okay? Yeah, we're really fine, great. And we're going up. And at one point, I get to this point, I'm walking up, and there's no trail. And what I think is a trail stops, and it's just this sheer sloping rock face that kind of goes up at an angle like this. It's pretty smooth, and I remember thinking like, Anyway, we're trying to figure out what to do. But there was this gouge is kind of cut out of the side of that rock, and there's a small waterfall that trickles down through it. And we had to boulder up all these rocks to try to get to the Spectacle Lake. And the whole way up, we only saw two different hiking parties the whole way. It's a pretty remote hike. And both of them turned around because they were like, we couldn't find a trail. It was too steep. So as we're going up, it just becomes more and more apparent that this will be a discouraging, distraught-making sort of summit to this lake. And we're have to climb up rocks, and it's getting to the point where we have to boost each other up to get up to things, and you have to grab each other, pull each other up to get to the top. And then, for the most part, we're doing okay. But my wife's best friend, our friend Sarah, she's like a really competent woman. She's like strong. She does yoga, got a great sense of balance. She's whatever. And so helping people, the whole time I'm trying to help folks, she's like, no, I can do this. I got it. And I'm like, okay, sure. But we get to this point, and there's a boulder on the way up in this narrow corridor that's really steep. It's about 6'3", and there's we have to somehow get over it. But only about like this, probably 2.5 feet, 3 feet above it. There's a space this big because there's an overhang. So you have to get up 6.5 feet, crawl under it, so you can keep going up. And so after I get up, I'm like, come on, guys, we can do this, And it's like we're grabbing wrists, and my huge buddy, I'm pulling him up to try to get over this rock. And then all of a sudden, it's Sarah's turn. And I'm like, come on, I'll help you up. And she's like, no, I can do this. I can do it. And she's starting to hesitate. And she's like, I'm like, come on, I'll help you. And she's like, I'm like, let me help you. And she's like, no, I think I can do this. I can do it. And she's like, I trust you and all. And I remember being like, no, you don't. You trust me, let me help you get up, But it was at this point that I'm realizing we need gear or something to get up this rock. We should have at least brought helmets or a rope or something. Or you guys know what a nut is? I think I got a picture of these, don't I? This is called a nut. It's a rock climbing tool. You take this and you slip it into the crevice of a rock. There's different sizes of it, so you got to get one that fits kind of the crack in the rock, and then you tie a rope to it, and you end up having to put all your weight on this, and you pull yourself up things like a 6.5 foot rock face with a narrow gap at the top that you have to slide through. So if you slip and fall, you don't die, right? And I'm like, oh, we probably should have had this kind of equipment, but we didn't. And so I was like, it's gonna be fun, right? But it's at this point in our trip, and my friend is hesitating, and I'm thinking, remember, we've come this far, and we're not going to get to the top. Because Sarah is unwilling to put her trust, really put her trust into my hands, her life to some extent, and I don't blame her, because if you're trying to get to the top of the mountain, if you're trying to do something like that, it's really important to decide what the heck you're going to put your trust in, right? Or if you're slipping this thing into the crack of a rock, you're really hanging your life on this little piece of metal. Because when you're going to the top of a mountain, it's the decision you make, right? We're talking about big decisions you make in college. The decision you make about what you trust yourself to can have really big ramifications. And I think that's true in all sorts of areas of our life when it comes to trust, right? Like when it comes to relationships or people or all sorts of things. Some of you guys have been burned with trust. You put your trust in someone or something and it's let you down. And so you have to be careful. And you have to make decisions about who you're going to trust, when it comes to life. And I would say when you think about the spiritual realm of your life too, there's a pretty big question you need to ask about who you're going to trust or what you're going to trust in. When it comes to your relationship with God, and what it will mean for you to know that your relationship with God, that you're okay, right? When it comes to being right with God, are you right with God? What are you trusting in to be okay with that? I think there's a lot of different things that people will put their trust in when it comes to trying to be right with God. There are some folks who would say, they're like, well, when it comes to being right with God, I just think, when it's all said and done, I think everybody really is okay with God, right? We all kind of get to heaven, not a big deal, I'm like, yeah, maybe. You can think about it that way. But I think what that person is putting their trust in is an idea that really everyone's okay before God. There's an idea that you're putting your trust in, right? Or some other folks, you may think like, okay, well, I just think when it comes to God, I think like I'm a pretty good person. I haven't really killed anybody. I haven't done anything really terrible, and I think I'm probably okay. What you're trusting is you're thinking my performance. The thing that I think my merit. I think I kind of have earned being okay with God. That everything between me and me is kosher and cool, and we're good to go. Right? You're putting your trust in yourself, sort of in your effort or your own merit, thinking, okay, I'm okay with God. And then there's other folks who it's like, thinking like, okay, maybe there's a religious system. You think like, okay, I'm doing all the spiritual stuff I'm supposed to do. I should be okay with God, right? Because I'm kind of checking the boxes, I'm doing what I need to do. Or, there's different ideas floating around, like some late at night, it's like send it in 1995, drink some Kool-Aid, do something weird, that sort of thing. It's like, and then you're going to be okay with God. I don't think it'll happen. Sacrifice a chicken, I don't know. Everybody thinks, okay, you're going to do something and you're going to be fine with God. Or maybe you think, there's some folks who say, I don't think anything happens after death. When we die, we just become dirt. And really, you're saying, I'm just kind of betting, I'm banking on, I'm hanging myself on the fact that I think that there's nothing after death. With all of those things, especially that last one, I just think, well, how sure are you that that's really what is true? And at some point in college, or in the next few years of your life, you will, to some degree, whether it's a conscious decision or not, you will come to some conclusions about what you think it takes to be okay with God. So that when it's all said and done, when life is over, when it's time to be dust, is everything going to be fine? Now, how do you know you're okay with God? What do you decide to put your trust in? It's a big decision. And I think there are on campus, you guys have probably experienced this already, but there's a lot of different ideas floating around about that topic. And you'll be challenged with a lot of new ideas. We're going to look at a passage tonight in the New Testament. And it's a passage that comes St. Paul, the Apostle Paul writes a letter to a bunch of early Christians in the province of Asia, in Rome, in the city of Ephesus. And he really explains to them what it is God has done for them, and how they can know if they're really okay with God in terms of being made right. And in Ephesus, I think it's similar to our circumstance. Because it's a port city, there's all sorts of crazy ideas floating around. One of the 7 wonders of the world, the Temple of Artemis was there. there's just a big exchange of ideas about what happens spiritually, what are spiritual truths that are going on. So if you've got a Bible, you can flip it open to Ephesians, the book of Ephesians. So for you can, if you don't know your way around that much, that's fine. You kind of open it up right in the middle and hang a right, and then you go most of the way to the end. Flip, 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 flip. And then you'll see Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. So if you see those books, you know you're close. So if you see Hebrews or any of that stuff, it's not too far. So that's what we're going to go tonight. We're going to look at a passage in Ephesians chapter 2. All right. So then this is what's going to go on in this passage. Paul is going to start telling the story about what it is that God has done for us. And he's going to start off really by talking about the bad news about the junk that's true about us spiritually. And this, I'm just going to say, this is a passage that's kind of wordy. At first glance when you read it, you're like, what does it say? And there's some words that it uses that seem kind of stereotypical Christian-y, churchy words that I think we're overly familiar with sometimes, but we don't really understand. And so we're going to try to unpack that a little bit tonight as we read this. This is what it says. This is what the Apostle Paul says to this group of people who are trying to figure this kind of stuff out, just like we are. Ephesians 2, chapter 1, we're going to go through 9. It says, "And you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you once walked, following the course of the world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is at work in the sons of disobedience." That's like a reference to Satan, right? So, the devil, if you're wondering. "Among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of our body. And in the mind we were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind." Those are some big, hard words, right? But it says, "But God, being rich in His mercy, because of His great love with which He loved us," I love that. But God, being rich in mercy, because of His great love with which He loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, He made us alive together with Christ. And it's by grace you've been saved. It says, "And He raised us up with Him and seated us with Him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, so that in the ages to come He might show the surpassing riches of His grace in kindness towards us in Christ Jesus." Okay? So there's some stuff. This is, like I said, it's kind of a big passage. And then here's the chunk that I want us to kind of focus on tonight. 6, it says, I lost my place. 8. "For it's by grace that you've been saved, through faith. And that is not from yourselves, but it's a gift of God, not as a result of your works, so that no one can boast." Alright, so let's kind of unpack this. This is really theologically rich, and like I said too, there's some words in here that maybe we're sometimes overly familiar with. But I think that if we take the time to really think about them, they will help us get what God wants us to kind of get and understand from this passage about being right with Him. Right? And so the two words that we're going to kind of look at, the first one is grace, right? You should say it with that Scottish accent, grace, right? That's grace. It's a deep, rich word. And the other word is faith, right? And these are two Christian talking about grace and faith, like blah, 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 right? So it's totally expected. But like I said, I think there's some nuances to this that I think if we just kind of skim over it, we'll totally miss the depth and the richness of this passage. So the first word is grace. Do you guys, anybody really get what grace means? Yeah, I grew up in a tradition where there were some prayers we said, and grace was in the prayer, right? And I thought, what does that mean? Like, grace, like you can walk across the room with a book on your head? Graceful, And I didn't totally get it. But this is probably the best way I think you can think about it. How many of you guys have received some sort of a grace period? So, like, either for a paper that was due, a bill that's due for, like, a phone, or a credit card, or a car payment, so you guys on your car. Anybody have a grace period, right? What it is it's like, right, your product, then hopefully you will get this in college at some point. You have a paper that's due on a Friday, and it's not done, right? What you deserve really is a 0, right? You deserve an F because you don't have it done. The prophet will say, he'll give you a grace period. If you turn it in by Monday, then I won't count it against you. But grace, it really is getting something you don't deserve, right? You deserve an F, but you get extra time, right? It's getting something you don't deserve. Same thing oftentimes with the bill. You get extra days to pay something. You have bills due on the 15th, and as long as they get the check by the 20th, you're okay, right? But grace is getting something you don't deserve. And Paul, in this passage, he says, it's by grace that you've been saved or rescued, right? You don't deserve it, but you get rescued anyway, right? You don't deserve it. And why? I mean, I think for most of us, we think, well, I kind of deserve it. I'm a pretty good person, right? But in the beginning of this passage, right, it says some really harsh things about us, that we're like dead in our trespasses, we're children of wrath. You know, these are like really strong statements. We're dead in our transgressions. You know, and really what Paul is saying is this is a picture of our state. With really naturally, we're dead. It says, dead in our transgressions. There's this junk in our lives. Spiritually speaking, what it's saying is, spiritually speaking, we're physically born, but spiritually we're still born into life. And so it's like we come into life, and we are, spiritually speaking, dead. Right? We're dead, spiritually speaking, right? We're dead in our transgressions. And so most of us like to think we can offer God something, right? We like to think, oh, I bring something to the table, right? But really, a spiritually dead person can't do anything spiritual at all, right? Because he's spiritually dead. He can't offer God anything. But Paul says we're dead in our transgressions. It's like strike one against us. It's a picture of our spiritual state. And then in Romans 3:23, Paul writes, for all have sinned, and we all fall short of the glory of God. Everybody, right? From the best of us to the least of us. We all have junk in our life, stuff, right? That if we think about it, we don't want anybody else to know, right? There's, like last week we talked about, there's something in our hearts that's just kind of bent away from God. And that's all of us. And he says this junk, it separates us from God. So it's kind of like this, right? So we're over here, and we're dead, right? We're dead in our transgressions, and we are separated. So we're at a distance from God, and God's over here, right? And so he's holy and perfect and spiritually alive, but we're over there and we're dead. So we are dead, and we are at a distance, spiritually speaking, from God, right? So it's like, bam, strike one, strike two. In a spiritual sense, this is who we are. This is our state. And we try to get to him. I think a lot of us, we think that, we're over here. We think, well, if I'm a good enough person, right? If I do enough good things, or I go to church, I'm at prime time, I'm not going to do all bad junk. We think that sooner or later we'll be able to get to God, right? And so then our relationship with him will be okay again, right? But a spiritually dead person can't do anything spiritually to get to God because he's dead. And he's at a distance. I think we think, for me growing up, I thought, okay, I remember growing up and laying awake in bed at night and wondering what would really happen to me growing up. I would think I was a pretty good person, not that bad guy, right? But it was really disturbing. Because I was thinking what happens if I die? And I didn't know what happened after you die. I thought, I don't know if it's St. Peter or Jesus. Somebody's at the pearly gates, right? And he's like, should I let you in? And I'd be like, yeah, please, or whatever. And he'd be like, well, fill this out, right? So you get some sort of a test or exam, and you sit down and say, A, B, C, C. And, right? C's the one you're supposed to mark, right? All the time, right? And I would think okay, it sounds silly, but I would be like, okay, I would worry that I would turn it in. And the sum of all of my life's actions and deeds, I'd turn it in and God would look at it and he'd be like, and I'd be like, well, you got the 74, which isn't too bad, but actually we only take 75 off. So, sorry, buddy, And it sounds silly, but that used to like really, like, was I okay? You know, like, did I do enough? Like, could I get that 75%? And I think what I didn't understand is, with God, it's not a 75%. It's not even a 92%. You know, when we think about it, we usually compare ourselves with other people, and we're like, well, I am certainly better than that guy. You know, like, so I've got, like, in this room, I've got to be in the top 10%. You know, I'm in the 90%. You know, you got to get in. But we're not being compared with people. We're really being compared with God. And He's perfect. I would say He's infinitely perfect. And even if I score a 99%, mathematically, anything short of infinity is infinitely far away from perfection, right? And so this distance between us and God, it's just too big for any of us to bridge in our own effort. Even if we could try, even if we weren't already dead in our transgressions. Too strong. And then in Isaiah 59:2, the prophet Isaiah says that it's our iniquities, our sin, that separates us from God. And so it's like this. It's like, picture that there's like this wall between us and God. And our junk is, so we are dead and at a distance, and there's a wall that separates us from God. So we really don't have any chance of thinking we can get there. And I don't know about you guys, but that's hard for me to swallow. You know, because I think, no, not me, it's not that bad. You know, but I think we all have that stuff in our life that, you know, like there's that moment or that thing that we're ashamed of, that we're like, we know that we're not cool with, let alone God being cool with. You know, and there's that thing that if anybody else in this room knew about, I know, you just die. And the ramifications of that are really big. So if this is our state, what do we do? What can we do? How do we deal with it? Don't we all have that kind of stuff? Being right with God, here's the thing though, being right with God is something we don't deserve. That's why we need grace. We need a free gift. Right? We need something we don't deserve because we can't do anything to deserve this. Right? That's why Paul, grace, that's why we need it. We need something that's totally free. We have to do it. By grace you've been saved, Paul says. By grace you've been saved through faith. And grace is sort of like this free gift, this thing we don't deserve is sort of the means. And faith is sort of and it comes through faith. Grace is the means and it comes through faith. And so faith is this other key word that I think we're going to understand this passage. If we're going to understand what it means to deal with this, we've got to understand faith. So, faith is, you can kind of think of it like trust. You know, there are some people who would try to, oops, lost the microphone. There's some people who would say that faith and belief are different, right? Like, you believe something is intellectual, but faith is more of an action. And I think that's just semantics. That's just kind of us trying to figure some of that stuff out in English. But all throughout through the Scripture, there's one word that's usually used to describe belief and faith. In the New Testament writers, they got this idea from the Old Testament writers. And in Greek, this word for faith, it's this word pisteo in this passage. So it's by faith you've been saved. Like pisteo, you've been not even Greek too. Pisteo. Grace, right? So whatever language is, I don't know. But it's the same word. This word in Greek, it means that you have a firm conviction, right? A firm conviction that results in a personal surrender, in conduct that's inspired by that surrender, right? That their faith means you believe it, you have deep conviction, you're fully persuaded of something, you have real confidence in that, right? So it's not just an intellectual thing, but there's some sort of like action that comes with it. That's the word in Greek that Paul uses here. And that word really comes from an idea in the Hebrew. There's a word that's called aman. It means to faith, to believe, to trust. And at one point, as Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, uses this word aman, to describe a place. This will make sense, believe me. It's a place in a wall where you can drive a peg. And that peg you won't be able to yank it out, right? And so you can put all sorts of pressure on it, and it may break off, but it will never come out of the wall, right? So they would build houses with stone and mortar, and they didn't, Jesus was a carpenter, but apparently they didn't have a lot of cabinets or something. And they would, instead of that sort of thing, they would build these pegs into a wall, and they'd hang pots and utensils and different things on them, right? And it would be a sure place where you could hang something on a wall. And so the prophet Isaiah uses this picture that faith is really like taking the peg of your life and sticking it in a firm place where it won't ever come free. Right? It's kind of like taking rock climbing and taking a nut and finding a place in a wall where you can slip it in a crevice and then grabbing the rope and leaning back and hanging yourself. Trusting that it will hold you. Faith isn't just an intellectual assent. It is saying, I'm going to take my whole life and I'm going to hang it. I'm going to trust this idea. I'm going to trust this. And I would submit to you guys that the only place that will hold us really is Christ. It's what Jesus has done for us. I mean, He has done everything for us. So all the junk in our life, Jesus is the only place, He's the only one who I think can deal with it. And because I think it's like this. The Scripture tells us that God, right, He looks, even at the beginning of this passage, it's because of His great love for us. But God, our state sucks, but God, being rich in mercy, because of His great love with which He loved us, looks over time and eternity, down at humanity, and He sees our broken, messed up hearts. And the way that our broken, messed up hearts have broken and messed up our world. And He looks down into the junk of our lives and He decides He has to personally get involved with it, to get His hands dirty and bloody with the mess of our lives. And so God comes and He straps on flesh. And He's born. He's planted in the womb of a teenage Palestinian Jewish woman. And He's God in a man's and Jesus looks out and He comes and He lives a perfect life. So He's never done anything wrong. He's never done anything to deserve that. But He comes and He lives this perfect life. And then He dies bleeding on a cross. He hasn't earned that death sentence. He hasn't earned it, but He decides to do it anyways because He wants to pay for something for us that we can't earn. He wants to give us His free gift. And He does that so He can remove, right? He can remove the wall that separates us from Him. And then He can come towards us in the distance. And then He would look down into our lives and He would reach for us. And then He would pick our dead, spiritually dead selves up and breathe life into us. And then we come spiritually, we come alive. And as He takes hold of us, we take hold of Him. And He would separate the distance that comes between us so that we can be in a right relationship with Him. So it would be the grace, the gift that we can't deserve, that we need, but He would do it all for us. It's His doing. It's not a result of our works so that we can boast, hey, I did it. It's Jesus doing it for us. And I think this is hard to get because this isn't the way our world works. There's a pastor in Office of Keller, he says, our world works where it's a meritocracy. Everything we get, we think we have to earn on our own merit. Right? Your grades, the job you will get one day, even your relationships with your friends, the opposite sex, your parents, we think our performance earns us something. That's the way our world works, but that's not the way it works with God. He's done everything to deal with our issue so that we can be made right with Him. And faith is trusting in what He has done for us and not trusting in ourselves. You see, at some point, there has to be a transfer of trust, right? And so we quit trusting in ourselves or whatever else, And we would look at Jesus and what he's done on the cross, and we'd say, okay, I trust you. I'm going to hang everything on you. I'm going to believe that. That's the only way. Verse 4 says that salvation is a gift of God. It's not by works, so that no one can boast, right? And like any gift, at some point, at some point, if someone offers you a gift, it's never yours unless you decide to receive it, right? Right? It can be a gift given, but never received. And Jesus has done everything for us so that all the junk, everything in our life is dealt with. It's okay. It's done. But at some point, like any gift, we have to say, okay, I want it. It's an act of your will. But you don't, it's like rock climbing. It's like my friend Sarah. She can say she trusts me. But at some point, she has to decide if she's going to take my hand and let me pull her up so we can see the top, so we can get to the spectacle. You have to decide if you will transfer your trust for your own ability or whatever it's in to the firm place that will never give way, to the hands that will not let you slip, to the hands of Christ. There has to be a transfer of trust. And this is a big decision. It's an act of your will. Put down whatever else you've been trusting in, take hold of him, and hang everything on him. Follow him in his way. So that day, climbing up to the spectacle lakes, my friend Sarah was hesitating and she was stalling. But eventually she decided that she would let me hold on tight to her wrist and pull her up to the top of that rock. And we made it. We made it to the top of the spectacle lakes. And I guess, I'm serious, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. And I think I would have missed out on the grandeur and the beauty and the excitement of getting there. Sarah would have, if she wouldn't have been willing to transfer her trust. And I think the same thing is with God. We will miss out on the beauty of the relationship and the experience of being right with God, being made right and okay with him, if we never transfer our trust into his hands. If you want to experience the grandeur of getting to know the God of the universe, we have to do that. And then it's cool because we get to spend the rest of our lives and the rest of eternity really reveling in the beauty of the truth. That there is a God who did everything for us, even though we didn't deserve it, we couldn't earn it, so that we could be right with him. We just have to receive that gift. Receiving it's a big decision. I think it's something that you have to do for yourself. It's no one can force you to do it. You don't have to be in a church. You could be here tonight. You could be walking home. You could be in the shower tomorrow morning. And at some point, though, you just decide if you're going to take your life and you're going to hang it all on Jesus and say, okay, I know I don't have what it takes, Jesus. Will you take me? Will you forgive me? Will you make me the kind of person you want me to be? I want to accept this gift of forgiveness. Thanks for dying on the cross for my sins. And just by an act of your will, a free decision, you decide to receive that. And tonight, I actually want to give you guys a chance to do that. If you've never done it. I'm going to have the worship band come up because they're going to lead us out of this tonight. But as they're coming up, if you're in a place tonight, and you realize maybe you've been trusting in other things besides Jesus and what he's done for you, and you're just like, okay, I want this, I want to know I'm okay with him, and you want to entrust yourself to him, then I love everybody, just close your eyes, all right? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to say a little prayer. This prayer it's not magic words. God is always more interested in our hearts than the words we say. But some of you guys tonight, you're ready to do this. And so I'm just going to say this prayer, and if you want to pray with me, just pray as I do it. But I just want to say, Jesus, we recognize that that we're broken, that there's something in us that's broken, and that there is junk, that there is sin that has separated us from you, we're spiritually dead, there's junk that's put a wall between us, and we can't do anything. We want to say thank you that you would come, and that you came, and you lived, and you died for us, and you died for me. And my junk, you came to bring restoration and hope into my life. And so, tonight, I just want to say, I want you, and I need your gift of forgiveness goodness, I need what you did on the cross for me. And I want to let go of all the other things that I've been trusting in, and I just want to trust you. Tonight, I want to put my faith in you. I want to just hang everything on you. I'm not going to trust in those other things anymore, but in what you did, Jesus. So will you take my life? Will you make me the kind of person that you want me to be? Will you change me? Jesus, I need you and I want you. And there's real hope, guys, as you speak these words to God, that this transaction happens where Jesus comes and he removes the barriers and he brings spiritual life into us. And the scripture has a promise that says, he who has the Son has life. He who does not have the Son does not have life. I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God so that you can know you have eternal life. And when you do this, if today's the day, remember September 12th, because it's a stake of the ground moment. You know, there's something that changes when you let Jesus be the one who makes you right with God. Because instead of waking up when you blow it, instead of feeling guilty and ashamed, you wake up and you actually feel, instead of feeling letting guilt and shame dominate your life, it's gratitude that makes it dominate your life. Because it's not about me, but it's about what he did. And we get to say, live in gratitude instead of guilt and shame. And so, Father, I just pray for these men and women that that would be true in their lives. That you would take them, that you would use them, and you would transform them.